My father was famous. He was the greatest samurai in the empire. He cut off the heads of 131 lords. He was the greatest samurai.
Good morning, everybody. It is 7:03 in the morning here. Sorry for the CP time here. Running a little bit late. I'm trying to actually do paying work while taking care of this business here. I'm going to put myself on camera here. Get myself up and going. Good morning, everybody. Let me see who's in the room, if anybody's already started. Before I put anybody any links up, I want to talk for a few minutes. Let's see here. Let me get my ducks in a row. Got to apologize for my disorganization. Let me go to my control room. We got 22 in here. Let's see who's here. The stream's a little slow today, so I apologize if it's a little laggy. Yes, good afternoon. Hey, it's Anon. Nice to see you there. And Jesse's back. You did the late shift, and now you're doing the early shift. Kind of sandwiching you in my chat here. Excellent. I'm not going to put up a link yet, just because. Do a few introductions. I'm going to try to keep this short. I'm on call this weekend. Got some cases going. I work in legal presentation. I do graphics for court, and have some cases coming up next week. So I'm on call, but I've let them know that I'm not available for the next hour, just so I can get all of this done. So this is hopefully being seen by people all around. I know everyone here in the United States is up and going, but trying to make this one a little early for us so that people over in Europe aren't up at 2 and 4 in the morning trying to listen to me yammer on. So anybody over there listening up and going, good afternoon to you, and thanks for coming. Real quick, I just wanted to run through a quick, not a rebuttal or even a debunk, but I get comments, I get suggestions all the time, of course. And I got one just a little while ago from a regular commenter. And let me find him here. I'm going to share my screen. Let me get this up and going. Let's see, share my screen here. I share my screen. Here we go. But first off, if you're not aware, which I believe you all are, I do have a Kickstarter going called Pole to Pole. It's I'm trying to get on the Polar Explorer flight that will be circumnavigating the South and the North Pole. They're trying to break a world record. They're going from New York to Argentina, from Argentina over the South Pole to Australia, Australia to Beijing, Beijing over the North Pole back to New York. And they're trying to do this to break a world record and just to celebrate aviation. I'm trying to get on that flight. I would like to chronicle everything that's going on there, and relay whatever data possible in order to just take something off the table that flat Earth proponents like to argue about, which is that they say no one's ever gone circumnavigated the poles. Whoops, let me get back here. So I got to just to have a little bit more content in this, and I send a link to this person. So I got a comment from Mr. Jake Bullitt, who is a flat earther that's always quite argumentative. It doesn't matter what you say, he'll just move on to another subject. You can knock down whatever he says. Your standard flat earther argument tactic. But this just an hour ago, this is literally this morning, he asked to explain this. If you're a glober, you should have good answers. And so I go to this video, and it's this gentleman here, I guess his name is Vincent Rhodes. And I like the title of his video, which is called "Researcher Finally Proves the Earth is Flat, Must See." Now, this is obviously clickbait title because the researcher he's talking about is himself. And the research he did is that he, grabbed pictures off the internet. So that right off the bat is a hilarious bit of claim. But what he's in Chicago, as you can see from the skyline, and what he's discussing here is a classic argument that comes up a lot, which is that the Chicago skyline is being seen from the shore of Lake Michigan, which is 59 miles away, and this is how the curvature should work. Now, I'm not going to go into the math of it because it doesn't matter, not in this case, because we're literally just dealing with refraction and mirages here. But he explains that it shouldn't be possible, and he gives a small description of how things are supposed to work in his reality. And he shows a picture of the skyline and how it actually appears. And then he shows a classic photo that we all see that gets passed around a lot, and that's this one here, of the Chicago skyline being seen. Now, this is a superior mirage. And as you can see, that a good part of the skyline is actually cut off by the curve of the Earth, which flat earthers never mention. They just say you shouldn't be able to see it at all. But they don't mention the fact that there's still a blockage. There's still a curvature of the Earth being seen. At best, they could say the Earth isn't curved as much as we say it is. But when they show this and say the Earth isn't curved, they're ignoring the fact that it's still below the horizon. And he goes into showing how what portions of the city are being seen in these different shots. And he continues to talk about how the news is even perpetuating this kind of myth that it's a superior mirage. And newscasters talk about it, and they even explain how mirages work on the news because they're the news, and as a weatherman, he knows how atmosphere works. And of course, Vincent expresses incredulity at such a claim. But what I find interesting and what I find telling is that people like Vincent, they try to say that this is how things are, that you can see the Chicago skyline from that distance. They don't seem to want to admit to the fact that you can only see it in special circumstances. Yeah, he says, well, I don't have my camera with me right now, so I can't zoom out with my P900, whatever the thing is, P90X, to show you how far these distances are, but believe me, it's a really, really far distance. What he's not really saying is that, if I were over in Michigan right now looking this way, I wouldn't be able to see the Chicago skyline. Looking at the weather conditions, he wouldn't be able to see the Chicago skyline. The next day, he's probably not going to be able to see it. Most days of the year, you cannot see the Chicago skyline, and that's why it makes the news. It's rare. It is a rare thing, rare enough that they actually have it on the news because it's special. It's special atmospheric circumstances where you get enough refraction. And we know for a fact that it's refraction, especially since we get different images with the different levels of skyline being seen. And if it was just straight visible light, line of sight, no atmospheric refraction, no superior mirage, you would see it on a regular day, and it would be the same amount of the skyline being seen. What you don't see, and I wish next time this happens, I hope someone puts a camera out and videos this the next time you get one of these superior mirages, is that you don't see how this mirage hovers and shifts and distorts throughout the day, and becomes more visible and is very much a mirage. If you zoom in on with a camera, you can see the distortion going on. You can see through things, and it will change the amount of mirageness throughout the day. That's how we know for a fact that it's mirage. And the fact that people like Vincent will call themselves a researcher and say that they have proven something based on things that have long since been understood, long since been debunked. It's just an example of the disingenuousness of people on the side of the flat Earth. So that's my discussion of that. That's my response to Jake Bullet, who wanted to know if we had any answers. That's my answer to that. I wanted to put it on. I've answered that question several times in the comment threads, but never on camera. So I wanted to give that a little bit, just to add a little bit of substance to this conversation instead of just me looking at the feed. Now let's see what's going on in the feed. Let's see. Yeah. If Jake's out there, come on over. I posted a link to this on Vincent Rhodes' page on that video. Don't know if he's up and going. I'm going to be on here for another 45 minutes or so. Feel free to come on in. OMG GMO. Hey, what's up? Hey, Ann. I like the type of comments you're making, Ann, in my my discussion threads. You put good content in there. I appreciate your level of discussion. The link will come up in a few minutes. Blue Marble. I just wanted to talk a few beforehand. Given that I know that I'm going to have to probably manage all the spammers the second I start up, and I haven't gotten adept at that yet. I wanted to just have a little bit of open mic time before then. Who else is in the room? Any flat earthers in the room? If so, chime in. What's up, Havoc? Senior D. Let's see. Just Circle. Thank you, sir. Detonation's back. Nice to see you. I'm going to be opening this up in a few minutes. I don't know if what was the name from last night, Detonation. What's that gentleman's name? Something Gamer. There was a gentleman on from the Netherlands last night. I can't remember. It was something Gamer, and had some great content that he was showing. And it was he acquired these data tapes and film negatives. I don't know, they're just actually process filmed already. From, I think it was Apollo 12 and from maybe the Pioneer. Yeah, NL Gamer. Thank you. And oh, Netherlands. I just caught onto that. I was thinking something else like NFL. Netherlands Gamer. And so they're great photos and data tapes from the old Apollo program. He had gotten them on eBay, and he's scanning these things. So check out last night's live stream. I can't tell you. At some point, I'll go through and I'll put some benchmarks in there so you can word certain chapters so you know where the content is. But and he's been scanning this stuff slowly. It was Apollo 16. For some reason I thought he had some Apollo 12 in there as well. Reno Diver. That aside, he's doing the scans, high-level scans of these images, and it's just great stuff. And it's interesting that these are old tapes and old films that are now they're being looked at by a third party. It's not being put out by NASA. NASA, of course, already has these up online, but he has his own version of them that were probably copies that were made in the 80s or the 90s, and someone took them home and left them in a garage, and so he got them on eBay. But beautiful content. I'm hoping he's going to put more up, and he's if you go take a look at the chat log on there, I think the links are in there as well. So I'll see if I can hunt through there, or maybe someone else can hunt through there and find it, repost the link so I can broadcast it. That would be great. So that was NL Gamer. Yeah, that was a gem of a conversation. It was something that I wasn't expected to get access to. So I appreciate that. And that's one thing about these Hangouts is you end up getting information you never knew was going on. Good. Azrek has the link. Excellent. All right, I'm going to do a little legwork here. Try to get the link in the Hangouts. No problem. We'll I'll post it in the exclusive chat, and then I'll post it up later. Okay, let me get this link in here for you. There's a Kickstarter link. Where are we at this morning on this Kickstarter, by the way? I think we're still just under $5,000. Yeah, I think we're still just under $5,000. Slowing down a bit, but I'm not concerned. I think we're doing all right. I'm still not sure which one of these links is best, so I'm going to put them both in here. Right there. Save those changes. Go back to the control room. All right, you guys should just refresh that page, and the link should pop up for you. I'm going to start people off muted, I think. Nah, I'll leave you guys live. That'll be fine. You guys will be good. So check that out. That link should be good. Refresh, you should be good. Let's see. Anyone else out there? Like, hey, what's up? Refresh, you should be good. Ooh, there's a little bit of delay there, so if you can mute your or earphones or something. Anyone else out there? Hey, what's up? Morning. Morning. Ooh, there's a little bit of delay there, so if you can mute your or earphones. Morning. All right, I'm going to mute you, Christian. You can unmute yourself once you're good. Yeah. Hey, Christian, which one of those, unmute yourself. I just muted because of that feedback. Which one of those links worked that you clicked?
Oh, okay. I just clicked actually on the top one, right under the. Okay,
cool. All right. I wasn't sure if the whole call thing was necessary. So I'm going to remove that one because it's not necessary. All right, cool. Just tells me off the bat. Let me get rid of that guy. All right, let's see. How was your evening, Christian?
Oh, it was splendid. Thank you.
You talked to anybody interesting last night?
just my wife.
I'm talking about me and Detonation and NL Gamer. I'm talking about us interesting people.
A little recap.
Jeez, I'm like feeding you an avenue to give me a compliment. And you're just like not taking it.
Oh, I mean, you sucked last night. I mean,
that's what I want to hear.
You had mentioned just a few minutes ago the NL Gamer. He was truly interesting in the photos that he had shared, and that whole. I was fascinated by it. I suppose I had never considered that there'd be people so deeply into it that they would have such a cool collection of interesting stuff from the Apollo.
Yeah, it's too bad that it's not particularly interesting internet content in terms of, because I just kind of wanted to sit there and let him scroll through things.
Right, me too.
It's not necessarily the most interesting thing for people watching the live. They're like, so? But yeah, I mean, I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to have him explain what he saw and what he had and just kind of just do the slideshow. It's like, so it's great content for those who are curious about it, but it's not necessarily the most compelling online visuals.
Agreed. Actually, Detonation, good morning.
Morning.
I had also appreciated a great deal of the things that you had offered to the chat as well, particularly in the realm of your thoughts on the nature of conspiracy theorists. And I think that was actually a really interesting part of the conversation. I did want to point out, Jerry, that we had a flat earther in the chat last night.
Mm-hmm.
Joaquin, I think was his name.
Joaquin. Jesus something.
I'm sure you guys noticed towards the end of the night, he was getting more agitated, actually, by the conversation. He seemed to me to be reacting a little bit. He seemed frustrated and angry. And
there's a lot of kind of internal stress going on with Joaquin.
Well, and this spoke. I thought it spoke to the point that I had made early in the evening about the studies that I had read, saying that many conspiracy theorists have had some trauma in their lives. And he did point out that he had some difficulties in childhood, and he had some issues with people convincing him that science was witchcraft and such.
Right. He also mentioned that, when you get involved in these drugs, you have these demons that come out. And so
Right.
He didn't really say what he was doing, but obviously he was kind of inferring that he's had some substance issues in the past as well.
Well,
He seemed to be a very moldable person, unfortunately. I don't know if it had to do with the drugs that he's doing, but he was easily swayed in either direction. Even with just a couple of hours of conversation, we convinced him one way.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's at one point I tried to shift to talk about, it's like if someone is trying to sway you and tell you that you should feel a certain thing, you should watch out for them. Because I was actually kind of concerned that he was showing concern that he was vulnerable to scammers and that he was naive and being fooled by these things. And the last thing I wanted to do was for us to be another group of people who were trying to twist him and convince him of something. And so I tried to just, like, if we can find a way of giving him some tools and making him feel comfortable with his own exploration, so he doesn't have this sense of victimization going on at all times. It's like, oh, well, these guys, they just twisted me up for 2.5 hours. And when I get back, these guys are going to twist me up and I have nothing. I'm just in the wind. I'm nobody. I didn't want that to be his takeaway on this. And I'm not sure if we helped with that at all. Like you were saying, he seemed very vulnerable.
well, I
was a little concerned with him.
I listened a great deal towards the end rather than participating a lot in that, the subject
Alexander
came up. And I can tell you that I had a drug problem, a severe drug problem, until I was about 30 years old. I had a meth problem for the majority of my life. And I discovered I was going to be a father. That's what changed it. But up until that point, I was couch surfing and engaged in all kinds of activities that I'm not going to detail here. But one of the greatest things that I had learned in my recovery efforts, and I have now been clean for 16 years.
Congratulations.
And thank you. Clean for 16 years. And during that time, during those efforts, I discovered that you can give yourself all of the purpose that you need. If you remember, his conversation was that he without his connection to these folks that were telling him that the God and the devil were basically fighting over him. That's kind of my takeaway from it.
Mm-hmm.
And without those beliefs, that he didn't feel like he had a great deal of purpose in his life. You can give yourself purpose. Your sense of responsibility, the activities that you engage in that bring you joy, is all the purpose that you need to begin building a greater purpose for yourself. I hope I'm articulating this properly. I noticed last night I had a lot of trouble sharing cogent ideas. So I ended up going back to school. I ended up getting my degree. But I was, to my, to the credit of my family, I was surrounded by people that they were cheering me on and making sure that I had all of the love and support that I needed. There are people in the world that don't have that, unfortunately. Went to the 12 steps.
What also scared me, I want to add, he did mention that he had given them money. I heard that.
He kind of, I don't know he didn't say how he gave them money, but he said that he kind of alluded that, I've wasted my time and my money on these people. Mm-hmm. And he didn't really say how he gave money.
I'm curious to know, and who he was talking to. Did he say who that was? Because
no.
I tried to go back
at one point I think he mentioned someone, but it was like, this guy with this, it was very kind of vague. So P Mars, you were up next. I do, before you say anything, I do want to say hey to Alexander. I wish you had been there last night, Alexander. There was this young man, Joaquin. I know you have uh, religious studies background.
Absolutely.
And so he was having a lot of kind of classic spiritual struggle discussion, amongst himself. And so it would have been interesting to have you there because I don't come from that background. So having the words to speak to someone like that in the language that they're used to isn't, it's not my forte. So it would have been interesting to have you there.
I'll go back and take a listen to it.
Yeah, take a listen. So P. Mars, you are currently muted. I think can you unmute yourself, or is that me muting you? Yeah, there you go.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I have like AC in the background, so I mute when I'm not talking.
Thank you. Very courteous of you. So did you have, you just here to chill, or did you have something you wanted to pop in with real quick?
Well, I mean, I could add a little. I mean, I'm a hardcore conspiracy believer. I entertained the idea of flat Earth, but upon looking into it, I discerned that the Earth is a globe and all that. But I can see why people go down that path, because I think there are valid reasons to question science. I think we live in a scientific dictatorship. I think like climate change, for example, is a total scam. And
by science, I've heard this before, and this is an honest question. What do the words scientific dictatorship mean when you say it?
Okay, well, I'm sort of like describing like Aldous Huxley's vision of like Brave New World, I guess. I'm getting this basically from this idea from Aldous Huxley. He gave a speech at Berkeley titled "The Ultimate Revolution," and he said that the controlling oligarchies which exist today have existed.
I'm going to mute you, 3 Edge, while he's got some feedback.
Yeah. So in this speech, Huxley was talking about the controlling oligarchies that existed in the past and exist today, presumably will exist in the future, would use science. See, like, I think what they're doing, like in the past, they used religion to control populations, right? Control people's minds, control how you live your daily life. And I think they're moving away from religion, and they're going to use science to do that. And climate change and your carbon footprint, it's going to be this science. They're replacing God with a man in a white lab coat to dictate how you're going to live your life, because, we need to take care of the environment. And when you can do this like carbon tax, like carbon affects everything in our daily lives, you can really control people's lives. And I think that it's a big manipulation scam to.
Well, is that scientists running that scam, or is that politicians and government on behalf of scientists running that scam?
Well, I don't know. My neighbor, growing up, he was a scientist, and he told me a joke. He said, I went to Barnes & Noble, and I asked for where's the science section? And the guy said to him, do you mean political science or politicized science? Meaning, like, I think scientists are being used by politicians and governments, yes. Like, and so it's like, that's the thing, man. I don't think science is bad, right? Like the scientific method, that's all good, and it's a great way to figure out the nature of reality, right? But the problem is it gets abused and misused. Like to me, the Bible and religion isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like it's good. Like morals, treat each other good. There's good things to that, just like I think there's good things to science. But it's like these people in power seize upon these things, and they use them and abuse them to manipulate us. And so it's like, I can see why people think the earth is flat. Like I have this, I have a justified level of paranoia based on like the history of the world is horrific. And I'm not going to just sit here and think like, oh, everything's fixed and the rulers in America are benevolent. It's like, no, I think the people in charge today are basically the Nazis that were in charge and did all the Holocaust stuff. So I think I'm kind of terrified for the future. Anyways, yeah.
Oh, no, yeah, go ahead, Alexander. But I want to make sure that people who want to respond to P Mars. Do you have a name, Mr. Mars?
I'm actually famous in the flat Earth community. They know me as a troll for my P Mars is what I go by.
Okay, just I didn't know if you wanted. Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to go by anything else. Okay, so P Mars is fine.
So,
Alexander.
Yeah, I'm just going to somewhat reply to what P Mars said, and I think what one needs to do when making this type of statement is take a step back and look at the difference between religion and science. And one of the fundamental differences is in science, the aim is to align beliefs with reality. And those beliefs are tested against reality. And when reality says, no, it's not like that, science changes. Whereas religion makes a stand, takes a stand, says this is the way things are. And when reality conflicts with that, religion says it doesn't matter, you're deceived, you're broken. We have some other kind of method of learning truth, namely revelation, and you must believe us or we will kill you. And this is just simply not, if we take a fair assessment, this is simply not the approach of science. Or
Can I ask a question real quick?
And just one more moment. And what I'll say is, at the end of the day, yes, humankind does oftentimes use any kind of knowledge for ill purpose. That's where the statement "knowledge is power" comes from. That doesn't mean that the things that we discover to be true and in concordance and in alignment with reality, it doesn't mean that these things are not true. It just means that some people will use that knowledge nefariously.
Yeah,
So,
I was going to briefly say, it's like, separating out the science from those who are speaking of it or make, for example, say climate change. You can separate out the science of climate change from the politics of climate change. There's people who say climate change exists, and people say climate change does not exist. But then there are people who say, because climate change exists, you must do this. Those are different people than the actual science itself. And those things should be separated in your mind as well. Because oftentimes it's like, yeah, I agree that happens, but do we need to do that? I don't know. That's a different thing. So I just wanted to throw that in and go back to P Mars.
I just wanted to throw in or ask Alexander real quick. Like what he was describing to me would be like dogma, right? And I think dogma is bad, but do you really think like science is immune to having dogma? Like, don't you think that there's dogma in science?
Right. This is an excellent question. Scientists are, of course, not immune from dogma. All human beings are susceptible to it, and someone who says that they are not, they're the person who's probably going to fall for it the most. They're going to have it in their lives and not realize it. So all human beings are susceptible to dogma. Science as a method is explicitly set up to eliminate or at least significantly reduce as much as possible that human tendency. So that's the difference. Again, you have to separate out the process and the method and what we learn by it from the human beings who do sometimes have dogmatic beliefs. And science self-corrects for that. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with you what you're saying. And I think dogma's and I agree, like, science is set up to eliminate dogma. I just think humans are susceptible to dogma, and then like you made a really good point. Is when you don't think you're susceptible to it is when you can be the most susceptible to it.
Exactly, and there are a lot of scientists who fall into that category. And so what I would say is I think we should call out dogma wherever we see it, whether it's a scientist or whether it's a bishop. We should call it out.
I agree with that.
Who hasn't? I think everyone's had a chime in. Excellent. So, Mr. Mars, I'm pretty sure you've been on my threads. My threads. I don't know if we've had much exchanges. What you say you're pretty famous as a troll on these things. Do you have any anything to present here? Any direct questions to ask? Anything that's like a nagging thing that maybe you've had an exchange online about with maybe one of the people here that isn't being clarified for you, that you want to drill down on for a little bit? We don't want to take up the whole time here because I'm here for a limited time. But is there a point that you'd like to focus on to direct the conversation a little bit?
I mean, the only thing that kind of, I guess, nags about me about this whole debate is I think that sometimes we get into these groups of like flat earther, globe earther, and we start to dehumanize each other. And I see some viciousness in the communities. And I just think like, I'm against these people at the top of the flat earth that are spreading lies, like, you know, like Jeranism and Mark Sargent. I think these people are liars, and like, go at them because like if they're, I think it's kind of wrong to I guess deceive people for money is what they're doing. They're creating a cult basically, like Scientology or something, and I think that's wrong. So I think you should attack those people. But like sometimes I see just like your Joe Schmo flat earther. I mean, like anyone who watched these flat earth videos are pure propaganda, right? They're not based on facts and evidence. It's just like all emotional stuff. And then if we're trying to debunk these people with facts and evidence, it's not going to work. It's like this emotional cult thing. And like they want to belong. They want to have a purpose in their life. So I don't know. I think that you need like maybe a different approach to like if you really want to convert them. But I think like your everyday flat earther, like you should be, people should just treat them with respect. Like they're not stupid. Like,
and I don't disagree for the most part. I mean, there are some who, honestly, like all people, let's be honest. There are some people who just lack a lot of knowledge. I mean, I hear people argue for the globe position that sometimes, you know, I see the comment threads and I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I agree with you about your end result, but you honestly don't have the evidence to support the claims you're making, even though you're a globe person. So it's on all sides. I hope you've noticed that I try my best not to fire on people unless I've been fired upon. You know, I don't just like, you know, randomly it's like the earth is flat and then immediately respond, you know, flat-tards go home, blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't go straight to that. And actually I've never referred to anybody as retarded or a flat-tard or anything like that. I generally try to stick to uninformed, ignorant of the topic, having a lack of knowledge of the subject. I try to keep to that because that's not an attack on their personal failings. It's just a description of what I see them expressing toward me. So I try to stay away from that as much as possible. And I'm serious. I lost track of where I was going with that. Sometimes I get talking and I know some of my friends are watching this and they're gonna be like, yep, Jerry just went down a road and he forgot where he was going, but kept talking anyway. So someone, if anybody else has a thought on this, and I'll get back to where I was.
Well, what I think is interesting is, P. Mars, you were talking about the disingenuous potential of the scientific community and politicians, et cetera. I think this speaks to what you're talking about, but in this case, these are not scientists. In my own opinion, they're charlatans anyway. I have seen a great deal of evidence of what you're talking about. Of course, I think we all have. When we look at the top guys, like you had mentioned, Jeranism and Skiba, and who's the other guy? Mike Helmlich?
Mark Sargent. And
then there's Mark Sargent, of course, who actually, Jerry, I think you had pointed out that it wasn't Skiba who actually sent a balloon up and he was very careful to make sure that the cameras that he sent up on the balloon, in order to prove that there is no curvature of the Earth, got the video back, and there was pretty clear curvature in the video that he got, and then had to come up with a whole new set of terms in order to excuse the fact that there was curvature in this video.
That was him. Yeah, he did that. I think first one was, it might have been Sly Sparkane that did a real good breakdown of what he had done. I mean, I had seen it, and it's one of those things that before I even had a chance to say anything about it, I think Sly had just gone in and dissected it fairly well. I think it was Sly.
And this is something that we see a lot. I mean, regardless of the type of information that is presented to these guys that refutes their claims, it doesn't matter. There is I would imagine that most of them are pretty heavily monetized. They probably earn some money doing this kind of thing. I really don't know. But maybe it's not even so much the money as it is the fame. There's a bunch of different things here that tend to attract the worst in people. Mm-hmm. You know, a little fame, a little money, a little power. I mean, you can become a famous YouTuber. We talked a little bit last night about Eric Dubay, and I think Eric Dubay was able to, as we had discussed, able to create kind of this cult that we're kind of looking at right now. Of course, the Flat Earth Society has been around a long time. The idea is nothing new. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, he kind of revived this whole movement and was able to write a book and sell them. And he's got, I don't know, a couple of 100,000 subscribers, if I recall correctly. So I have to wonder if some of these guys, obviously they're intelligent. You know, it's been my experience that you don't rise to that kind of position in anything that you do if you don't have some brains to begin with. Mm-hmm. So I have to wonder, are they quite aware that what it is that they're selling is garbage, but keep doing it for those reasons, for the money, for the fame, for the power, for having minions around them that agree with their position all the time without even questioning it.
Oh, and they may not even have the skills to even recognize that they're terrible at it. They may be able to see
go ahead.
that they're so bad at this whole like space and electricity thing. I think it comes back to them not being able to have a serious education of any kinds. That in terms of like, sure, they might have had formal schooling in some way or another, but their own personal insight into the world around them is based on their own personal version of truth, which each individual person these days is defining as I'm the only one who knows truth and I'm the one who defines it.
Yeah, I have some friends who are fairly conspiracy minded. P. Mars, you said that you're very much a conspiracy minded person. Yeah. And years ago, before I knew these people, I would have said that, all these people who believe in conspiracy, they're just stupid. I mean, how can you believe this stuff? And then as I've got to know some friends of mine who are really deep into this stuff, at least for the people I know, intelligence isn't the issue. And usually, at least a couple of friends of mine, they're quite intelligent people. And I think that's part of the problem. Is that they're highly intelligent, but there's a filter system where they don't check their own thoughts and they accept their own thoughts more quickly without censoring it. So, given that from maybe through their schooling, they've been able to trust their intellect because they're fairly intelligent people to get them to the right answer. When they start to go down a wrong path, or they're recognizing patterns that are imposed by their own bias, but not from what's actually there. They don't have the mechanism of checking themselves. They just accept their own intelligence for what it is, and so they end up going down these roads. But it's not that they're not intelligent. Sometimes they're highly intelligent. They just don't necessarily recognize a misstep that they've made, and so they keep going down, and they don't have that kind of censoring process. One thing that I think helps me is the fact that I try my best to recognize that I don't know things, and it's like, so even if I see something and I go, oh, well, that's because such and such. Wait a minute, hold on. Is it, or is it just because that's the quick method that my brain got to, and it feels comfortable to me, so I'm going to stay with it. So it's a self-correcting thing. I guess maybe it comes from having been wrong a lot in the past. I understand that I go down the wrong road. So it's not about lack of intelligence when it comes to conspiracy-minded people. I've really had to come to that to accept that a lot of people they're not stupid.
Could I bounce?
Sometimes they're just.
I got a conspiracy. I could bounce. I want to bounce off you guys. Okay, so there's a book called The Cultural Cold War, the CIA, and the World of Arts and Letters. And this is dealing with like propaganda that CIA was promoting in a lot of like the 60s by Jonas Stoner Sanders. And she talks about the CIA was promoting nihilistic art and nihilistic books or something. And when I think about Flat Earth, it kind of seems like nihilistic to me, right? It's just like they believe in nothing, right? Like, and I don't know, like, what if I kind of think this maybe there's some government propaganda behind this flat earth thing, because you notice like these rappers are promoting it, these basketball players are promoting it. I just think Mark Sargent gets to go on coast to coast radio, like big radio shows that get lots of viewers. I don't know, it seems like this flat earth has been promoted through the mainstream, this new resurgence in a way, and it just kind of spikes. Just reminds me of that book when like the CIA was promoting nihilistic art, and I just think flat earth is kind of, they believe in nothing, and it's like this promoting this disbelief in everything. I don't know, what do you
well, that's the whole point of it. That's essentially the core of the entire flat earth belief. It's not necessarily that the earth itself is flat, it's just that you need to question every single thing that's ever been told to you. And to the point that if you are ever told the same thing that you've already been heard, it's wrong, period. And it doesn't matter what you say or anything, because it's the immediate response is, oh, prove it. Oh, can you prove it? Oh, can you prove it? Which is all in of itself just a debating, destructive way to try and talk to somebody, because you can't just pull evidence out of your ass at that very moment. Like you can pull out the reams of paper or whatever. But part of it that comes into, I think, is the religious bias towards it, because I would say the greater majority of those who believe in flat earth are also very religiously based, but not in they've read it a lot themselves, they've studied the Bible or the Quran or something. It's they saw a couple videos by other Christian or religious YouTubers, and they saw it, and God said that all science is bad, and then they start applying all these other religious tones to it to support their claim for it. I think the religious bias in this is very big in trying to overcome the flat earth mentality.
Yeah, so I would say as someone, again, who was religious for the greater part of his youth, and also an engineer / computer scientist, which is a strange mixture, I can say that what happens is we tend to compartmentalize our knowledge, and in some sense we're taught to do that. And overcoming that is partly a personality trait, and it's partly something that I think people can be taught. And it's the classic Dunning-Kruger effect, where you become so accustomed, like you were saying, GreaterSapien, to being right, that you think in all these areas I'm right, even in the areas where I don't have specific knowledge. But to me, where the real overlap comes with religion is that in religion, you're taught to believe things for terribly bad reasons, and you're taught to believe it based on an authority figure, either your preacher or the Pope or an ancient book, telling you that it's true. So you're taught to just really believe things on bad reasons, and it's hard to overcome that if you've been indoctrinated to do that from a very, very young age. So I think one of the keys is addressing that issue, and it's very prevalent among heavily religious America that kids are taught throughout their childhood into their young adulthood, believe this stuff and believe it for bad reasons. One more point I wanted to say in closing. This is the first time I've ever heard the opposite side. In other words, I usually hear flat earthers say the government is trying to convince everyone to believe the earth is round, so don't believe it. This is the first time I've ever heard someone say the government is trying to get everyone to believe that the earth is flat. So and the reason I
benefits the government more than I think. Like if you were to consider every single truth movement, every single chat line that's out there, there's rarely one that you can get into that doesn't have a flat earth mixed into it.
But I'm just saying, you said the CIA was
Alexander, go ahead.
You were saying the CIA is the sponsor for this.
Yeah.
And I can just say, as someone who's worked on government contracts in the past, the CIA is not as proficient as people think they are at doing this type of thing. And it's definitely odd to hear that they're doing both, convincing everyone that their world is flat and convincing everyone that the world is round. It's just interesting to hear both. And what I'll say is it gets again to this, if you have a conspiracy theory mindset, you can look for the government's fingers and everything, but if you do that, I think you're going to oftentimes miss the real method of addressing the problem, which is to teach people how to evaluate evidence and how to believe things for good reasons.
This is actually something that I talked about last night. Is that
Oh, better mic. Nice.
yeah, thanks.
I have Mike envy.
It's a big one too. I wrote a paper last year. I'm currently actually back in school as an adult, and I'm studying for my degree in history. And you know, and I too have I'm a network engineer. I have a degree in computer science as well. Um, Last year I wrote a paper on the fact that American schools are no longer largely teaching history all the way through the end of high school anymore. Many schools have adopted it as an elective rather than a core course. One of the most important things that studying history teaches is the ability to disseminate information and sources. It teaches analytical skills.
Right.
It isn't simply a regurgitation of timelines, events, and people. It is something that requires that you think your way through it. And this is something that seems to be missing, is the ability to critically disseminate information. This is something, actually, Jerry, you had mentioned that one of the things that you do for work is I believe it was helping prep witnesses for
Yes.
court, right?
Yeah.
I was fascinated by that. It seems to me that that would require a great deal of this kind of critical analysis of a situation in order to present pertinent facts and information, rather than taking a position. Taking a position without doing this can actually cause you great difficulties and harm in general, especially in public discourse.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, I think when I look around at the rise of flat Earth, if you will, and how many people are getting involved in this, the rise of flat Earth. To P. Mars's point, he actually said that he believed that climate change is a scam. So many people say this, and then they kind of nod their heads. Yeah, it's a scam. It's a big government ploy. And in the position that I'd have to take on that is that since I am not a climatologist, I'm not an atmospheric physicist, for me to decide based on what somebody who, builds apartment buildings for a living. You know, again, I said a lot of this last night. What do you do for work? How do you know? To the point that because I'm not an atmospheric physicist, for me to take a hard line position that climate change is a scam is intellectual dishonesty. I can't live with that. The only way that I could possibly take a hardline position and accuse people involved in this kind of thing as being scammers would be for me to go and study it and learn it first. Mm-hmm. So there is, you know, it's funny, you know, we're talking about faith and science here. I guess there is, unless you're willing to go do that kind of study as a discipline, you're going to have to take some faith in what science says.
No, it's absolutely true, and it's a problem when skeptics, people who are science-minded, try to separate themselves from the word faith, just because it has a different connotation. But the fact is, we do have to take certain things. I wanted to touch on real quick something you had mentioned, Christian, about teaching of history. And I just want to give a shout out to my son's school, which is Edna Brewer Middle School here in Oakland, California, who they do still teach history and require it. And the reason I want to discuss it, because they, and I hope this is something that's going to start happening more often in schools, is my son had an assignment earlier this year, which was, it was a history, they had this big history night. They actually have a big event. It's like a science fair. It's history night.
Awesome.
And everybody does a thing on history. And what his class was assigned, the people in his class were assigned to do, was to come up with an event in history that that gets taught in school, and discuss it, and then talk about the contrary view that's not taught in school and why. And so they had to not only present what is taught, they had to present what is not taught and what are the strengths and the weaknesses of teaching and not teaching these things. And I thought that is excellent. It's forcing them to look at the subjects that the other point of view, and what and what they had to do was they had to say, are there reasons for not teaching it, and explain why it shouldn't be taught, or what could be the benefit of having that contrary view taught in school. And that was part of their assignment they had to do. And I thought I was never told to do anything like that when I was in school. It was just like, hey, you got to do a thing on the Revolutionary War and make a diorama about it, and done.
Yeah, right.
The diorama, right.
It wasn't look at it, compare and contrast, and explain the benefits of teaching these things. So it gives me a little bit of hope. I don't know if it's something that's
is that a private school or is that
no, it's open public school.
I wish science were taught. Like, people forget that history actually is a science, but I wish science were taught like that as well, because even in science class, they're taught equations, they're taught science laws. They're not taught the method, except for maybe a week in one grade level. They get to memorize the scientific method. And I wish science were taught. I wish there was a science fair or a science event where they said, the Earth is round. Now take the alternate view. The Earth is flat, and see if you can prove it, and see what falsifies it, and why it's not. See why we know that it's not. It would be interesting if science were taught.
It's
like
exciting.
That.
Go ahead, Detonation. Is that you?
Detonation, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. It's exciting to hear what you said about your son's school. Like I had said last night, I have my GED, and I think a lot of my school, I didn't go to a very good school, and I know that now as older. They really didn't help. It's actually, I like hearing about the successes now and the things that are getting better, because at least in the area that I'm in now, I mean, the graduation rate is less than 50%. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Where do you live?
And actually, I live in upstate New York, in a town called Schenectady.
Yeah.
There's a couple of schools around us that have fantastic schools, but I grew up in closer to Albany, and the schools were just, it was terrible. And my parents actually tell me all the time that they wish they had done better for me. My father I grew up in the military, and I don't blame them at all, but I'm sure some of it was me too. But it is nice to hear that in areas things are getting better.
Yeah, it is. We just got who just popped in?
Hello. Yes, I don't mean to interrupt your conversation, but my parents
I'm
actually.
not going to be here for that much longer, so I want to make sure you get in here.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Yeah, I'm a math teacher, a public school math teacher, and I could definitely identify with what you guys are saying.
Thank you for your service.
Oh yes. Yeah, I also served in the Marine Reserves, but during peacetime. That was many decades ago. But anyway, the thing is, kids are not taught critical thinking. And I forget which one on the panel suggested that we teach, literally we teach flat Earth as an alternative. And then let's explore it, because you can figure the shape of the Earth using tools that you can make yourself. That's literally the point of my channel, is trying to get people to get outside, measure stuff, measure the sun, moon, stars, etc. And you could figure out the shape of the Earth. But that's not taught. It's just okay, here's the globe, and it's because of the lack of critical thinking, people, people are oh, we're just being indoctrinated, or at least flat earthers say that.
Right. And to give schools a little bit of a break, they have a limited amount of time with these kids, and there's a level of expectation from the average parent, who just why, I've had discussions with parents, and I've had discussions with just people in line at the DMV, and there's well, why are they taking the time to have kids do this and that? They should just be in there, just learning how to just do long division and this and that. They want that kind of just straight results, factory oriented, get them in there, make them so that they can balance a checkbook and get them out into the workforce type education, as opposed to that more well-rounded aspect, which takes time and is often very difficult for parents to understand. They didn't go through it, so it's not their way of learning. And so I'm sure there's a lot of resistance on the part of parents, part of the system in general, to add these kind of new methods in there. That's why I enjoy the conversations I have with some of my son teachers, because they find ways of slipping stuff in as much as they can, but they have to slip things in terms of okay, we have an extra, I have 40 minutes, 50 minutes of this class, 40 minutes, I have to make sure I do this, but I'm going to try to add this little real world twist to it so that they can learn a little something extra to it. So it's just a little,
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah, who is
this
speaking?
Is P Mars.
Hey.
So, yeah, I didn't really know how to justify my belief that, because I believed I lived on a sphere my whole life, right? And then when I was confronted with flat Earth, like, to be honest with myself, I couldn't really justify why I lived on a sphere. Now, after being in the flat Earth community for a while, I can do that very well now, but at the time I couldn't, and I think that's the one thing I give flat Earth credit for, is it made me realize that I probably have more beliefs that I can't justify than just that, right? So I think I'll give flat Earth credit for that. It did make me aware of that, and I think that's a valuable lesson, I guess.
That is, and when people say, why do you bother doing this, and why do you bother even, discussing this? I don't know who all here is a content creator, but I've said this before. There's a tremendous amount of learning that happens when you decide to teach something. When you decide that I want to figure out a way of explaining this to someone, you have to end up researching it. You find out where the holes are in your own knowledge, and you have to figure out a way of filling that in. And so it's not just like, oh, I'm going to debunk these people. I'm going to make sure that people see they're wrong. There's also, let me figure out. It's like working out. It's like, oh, let me exercise this muscle different. Let me learn something. Let me become stronger in my own knowledge through doing this. Which is why I don't churn out videos all the time, because it's like, there's nothing interesting about that. I'm not going to learn anything about it if I make this video. Let me find something that, oh, this one I need to work on a little bit. That's intriguing. I have to figure out how I can do this, how I can explain this to people, and I have to learn about this myself. So that's one thing that does come out of this. I can say, it's like, hey, I feel more confident in my ability to explain things and my understanding of my own beliefs because of the flat Earth and moon landing denial was what first got me into this. It's been helpful in that sense, though frustrating.
How many have you ever had an occasion to actually abandon something that you were looking to debunk or to teach because you went, this is just a little bit beyond me, and I don't want to be wrong about
it? Not yet. There are subjects that I haven't, like I think I mentioned last night. Well, people ask me about like specific technological things that are outside of my wheelhouse. Like, and it's like, well, how does film emulsion and how this should work, and how it's like, what, that's not my thing. I don't even touch it. I'll throw it out there. Hey, anybody know anything about this? Go ahead. But yeah, it's just not my thing. So I don't go down those roads. I've gone down like wrong modes of thinking. It's like, oh, I know, I'll make a video and I'll just do this. I'll just talk about this, and that'll work out. I know I will. So I'll just start scripting it out, and then I'll get halfway down. I'm like, oh man, you were going down the wrong road altogether. Oh, I mean, you're still right, but that is the wrong argument to be making, And so then it's like, okay, how do I reword it to make sure it works? Okay, boom, 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 boom. So I've done that. I found myself going down poor methods of argumentation while trying to explain something, and had to redo it. That's one reason why I don't do stuff live, that much. Why don't live debate? It's like, because the human mind just goes down roads when it's not edited that may not be where you want to go. You should think through the things you're saying.
Could I throw something in there?
Yeah.
I think Alexander, I think you were on here about a week or two ago, and I had said a statement about flat Earth not really being as old as everybody says it was. You said I needed to bring a lot of information for it, but I promised last time I would bring all my research. I think I'm screen sharing it right now.
Yes, you are.
This is just a small piece of that timeline that I was talking about, trying to trace out all the different, every battle, group, civilization, what's kind of gone on, how the civilizations have risen and fallen, where the different belief systems come from. And it kind of goes all the way to the front. So anybody who considers themselves kind of a conspiracy nut, I would dare say I'm in first place.
Well, this is interesting.
But that's the interesting thing when digging into the flat Earth part of it, is that there's a part of their innate distrust of government that you can't really knock them for, because when they start talking about, like, even if you just talk about NASA, the different Nazi scientists that actually did work. I mean, Werner von Braun is the whole reason NASA had a rocket program. So it's not that hard for them to feel justified in their distrust of NASA when our government was hiring tens of thousands of Nazi scientists to come over.
Let me just throw this out there as someone who despises Nazis and Nazism. Nazis believed many true things.
Yeah, but fascism wasn't actually defeated at the end of World War II. It was only the glimpse, the illusion of defeat, so that the world could focus on communism.
Sure.
The majority
fascism still exists today. So yeah, I agree.
There's like something like 50 different solely German communities in Argentina and Chile that are directly just they're first and second generation Nazis. Yep. The majority of Nazi scientists escaped to America and Soviet Union. Joseph Mengele died on a beach in Brazil after marrying a hot Brazilian wife. I mean, this is a guy who took twins and would torture one twin in one room to see if the other twin would feel something.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no doubt the Nazis were wrong about genocide. They were right about rocketry. So,
well, who was behind Nazism is the whole point, because that's the thing that we never actually get to. Most flat earthers will start throwing out the Freemason or Illuminati words without actually ever researching any of these different groups, and there are a lot of groups.
Yeah, the Bushes, like George Bush's senior's father got indicted.
Scott Bush, one of the main people under the Espionage Act. He was arrested. But J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, these are all major families that all had everything to do with financing that, and the Rothschilds helped finance the entire.
Yeah, you're messing up there. Yeah, but all of that.
Nazi regime.
Wherever you fall on the the secret groups or whatever, all of that is separate from the facts of the science.
Yeah.
Well, that's where
that's where they screw up.
I think they meld enough that to just look at the scientific part, we miss all the historical pieces that got us here, and then we miss all the pieces of the manipulation and what's been put out there to manipulate us. Like, for example, climate change and stuff like that.
But to what GreaterSapien was saying is, I think, so to your point, I agree it's a mistake to ignore the history. Absolutely right. And if you do that, you're definitely going to make someone who's conspiracy-minded think, well, what is he trying to hide from me, right? But no matter what we find out historically about who was behind NASA and who started our rocket programs, because we know many of those people were Nazis, none of it changes the facts of the science. None of it. That is at the bottom.
None of it changes the fact that if I go outside, I see the moon in such a way that geometrically cannot be possible if the Earth is flat. Right. None of that changes. I mean, if we concede, which I am not, but if we concede the nefariousness of the manipulation of all these people and all these groups, let's say they have been pushing all these different things, it still doesn't change the fact that if you do the math, if I go outside and look at the sun or the moon, and someone 2,000 miles away goes out and looks at the sun and the moon, the math shows that cannot be a nearby sun over a flat surface. Those are different. Those are different things, and it's provable now with your own observation, regardless of whether or not those conspiracies happen. I'm going to do 5 more minutes. My work is pinging me over here. I'm on call. So we're going to do 5 more minutes. So we'll do sum up some of this conversation. Is there someone in here that is relatively new that hasn't said anything?
Who's Azarac with the Voyager gold plate? I love that.
Yeah.
I was here yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you remember.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, to your point, arguments should stand on their own merit, right? You shouldn't believe in something just because NASA tells you to. You can go out, set up your own telescope, and figure those things out for yourself. It's not very hard. Fortunately, we have access to those tools. And
far too many times people say, well, that's NASA's, propaganda. That's, NASA's, theory of the Earth, and NASA's this, NASA's that. Not understanding that all this stuff is,
not NASA.
Yeah. It's confirmable by other groups. It's been around before NASA even existed. And I don't need NASA to sit down with a piece of paper and prove and show how light should travel. And, I don't need NASA for that. Though they'll say NASA's math, they'll just take it an extra level. But I don't need NASA for that. So yeah, you're right. You don't have to take their word for it. So I try not to invoke NASA unless it's absolutely necessary. Invoke, boy, that sounds like
I mean, they have access to a lot of funding that other people don't, and they can carry out missions that are far more complicated. But it's not the basis of knowledge that you can attain without going to any sort of organization is just enough to disprove flat Earth. And
one interesting thought experiment is to just throw NASA under the bus, throw all of established science under the bus, just as an experiment, and then just get outside. Maybe you've got a digital zoom camera, you've got a protractor, you've got maybe a little plumb bob, and what measurements can you make? What careful measurements can you make without even leaving your own backyard? And that's really where I think people like flat earthers did more careful observations and careful measurements, then you can literally discover the shape of the Earth without resorting to appeal to authority. It's a fun exercise.
Well, and this is actually kind of a problem amongst flat earthers that are, to their credit, are attempting to do their own experiments and do their own research, is that I think a great deal of their starting point, their jumping off point, is wrong, in that what they're looking to do is prove that they're right, rather than go, okay, here are a couple of possibilities, let's do honest experimentation to figure out which one of these possibilities works the best. And I'm sure, Jerry, you remember the temperature of moonlight thing, where people would go and buy those ridiculous laser thermometers and prove that the moon is actually, what were they trying to prove, that it was warmer or colder?
That moonlight is actually colder. It cools things, so it's colder in the moonlight than it is in the shadow of the moonlight.
And they're not taking into account some of the variables that are extremely important. For example, how much warming did the surface that they're testing receive during the day, and how much of that, what's the difference between that and the different layers of atmosphere above it? I mean, this is part of the problem we were talking about earlier.
I actually did that experiment, and I didn't put it up because the thermometers I had so much varied readings. They all showed that the moonlight was a little bit warmer, but the thermometers I had were so varied in their temperature that it's like that tells me that this isn't sensitive enough. And so I looked at it, I'm like, that's garbage. That's, even though it goes the way I want it to go, it's kind of garbage. There's too much noise involved in this. And so
that's called intellectual honesty, right?
I didn't put it up. But but one thing I'd noticed on a lot of those is like they put a thermometer and another, a piece of material that they would test the temperature, and another piece of material, and they would put a block to block the moonlight, and that there, and they'd be doing it, and I'd be watching the video, and I'm like, I'm hearing a lot of wind blowing. So there's one thing that's sitting out in the wind and one that's behind this block. And so it's not getting the wind on it, and you're testing the temperature of the thing that's not in the wind, and it's warmer than the thing that's out in the open in the moonlight that's getting the wind, so now it's colder. Did you notice that you were kind of shielding the other one from the cooling? It's like little things that were happening. So I set up a thing that would take care of all that, but I still noticed that the temperature fluctuations of the measuring device and my different thermometers sucked. And even though it's like, the temperature, it showed what I thought it was going to show, but it was just garbage, and so it wasn't where maybe one of these days I'll get more sensitive stuff or better material. But, I had looked into the reflectivity of the objects and making sure they all had, the same level, that they were, kind of in the range of the laser thermometer, because they have a standard type of reflectivity, I guess, that they emissivity, I guess they call it, of the surface. I try to make sure all that stuff was working, stuff that's never mentioned in the flat Earth videos. But it was just like, what, this is garbage science. I can't put this out. It looks like, it just looks like noise. So I didn't do it.
Hey, GreaterSapien, I know you're about to shut down. Do you remember the guy's name from last night, and did he give you any contact information?
Which one? Joaquin?
Joaquin, that's his name?
Yeah, well, his username was Jesus.
Jesus love me, please. PLZ.
Yeah. Jesus love me, please. Yeah. His real name was Joaquin.
Are you talking about the guy?
But yeah, I was going to say
Flat
that.
Earther, or are you talking about the guy who presented all the super cool info from NASA?
No, the flat Earth gentleman who was kind of really distressed.
Right. No, I was wondering if he was asking about Joaquin. He was asking about the NL Gamer.
No. NL Gamer. I heard about his information. That sounds good too.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah, I had told him about this morning. I was hoping he'd pop on. Someone else just hopped in. Schubert, I'm about to sign off because I got to get to work. But I wanted to say, hey, is there anything you wanted to pop in and say real quick?
Yeah, I just got done watching your freaking 4-hour hangout.
My apologies.
And at the end, you said, yeah, I'm going to do another live hangout at 7. I look up at the clock and say, dang.
Yeah, I have a few. I had a couple windows. Mostly, this is for people who are, in Europe. They always complain that you come on at night and it's 2 a.m. here. So I said, okay, I'll do one in the morning. And then,
when is the next live stream that you're gonna do?
I haven't figured. It's a holiday weekend. I'm kind of overscheduled. I will post like a video blurb, a little advertisement, at least 24 hours beforehand.
All right.
So you guys will know. So I'm not just like stealthily coming in and zipping out. I'm hoping to get a few more flat earthers on here. Kyle Crow was last night and he wouldn't come in the room even though there was room for him.
Yeah.
I know there are some other people who have they claim that they want to talk about it, but they don't want to come in the room when the time comes. So let's see if we can get some people in the room, see if they can put their money where their mouth is. And speaking of putting your money where your mouth is, talk about a segue. For those who are watching and have not had a chance to check out my Kickstarter fundraiser, that was horrible. Have not had a chance to check out my Kickstarter fundraiser. Check it out. The link is in the description. If you want to support this attempt at doing a nice scientific demonstration, putting a kind of a nail in the I'm not gonna say put a nail in the coffin, take one of the arguments off the table of the flat earth community, please contribute whatever you can. If you can contribute just by sharing it, blasting it out, that's cool too. I understand people don't have money. I don't expect people to be putting out money they can't afford, but if you have a friend that trusts you enough to pay him back, say, hey, put up $10 for me and I'll pay you back. But support it on social media and see if we can get this going. And if you are a flat earth supporter and you really want to see me fail, there are so many opportunities for this to go wrong.
Pledge all the money.
You will have access to all the information that everyone else has to repurpose and repackage any way you wish. So consider.
Believe me, they'll find a way.
Consider contributing as well, just to make sure this happens. And like I said, you contribute $5, I will put a shout out to you in a video. I will post a link to your social media, tell people to follow you. I won't know whether or not you support me or not. I will still try to get you followers just for supporting me. And then we'll deal with the ramifications of all that later. So just a little plug, throw that in there. So let's get some closing remarks. Christian, you were first in the room, so I'm gonna have you be first out.
Oh, well, that's always nice. That happens to me quite often. All right, dude, get the hell out of here.
It's like, do you have any closing remarks?
Actually, I found this morning's conversation to be even more compelling than last night. All of the discussions of critical thought and dissemination of information are really, I think, this is at the root of so many different issues, not just flat earth conspiracies, but political opposition. Actually thinking through your positions rather than just taking them because you connect with them emotionally is really important. Right. So thanks for the great conversation this morning, guys.
Thank you very much. I'll look forward to talking to you later.
Okay, cool, man.
Who else is in here? Detonation, I think you were pretty close to the beginning too. Let's have any exiting words?
I just actually want to thank you guys again. I'm sorry I didn't retain your name, but the flat earther that's here, thank you for making this conversation easy for us and not just a jerk fight. I'd like to see more of that in these conversation and not just beating each other up.
Right. That's absolutely true. Before I go on to someone else who needs to do a quick exit, I want to do a quick shout out to NL Gamer. We're about to shut down, so I want to give you a chance to at least post a link in the chat to your website with the good information. I don't have time. Sorry, we've been here for almost an hour and a half, and we're shutting down, so we can't really go into the material you have. We've talked about you a couple times on this in this conversation. So I'm going to hand it over to NL Gamer to briefly give just a quick mention of what his material is and a link, and then we're going to have to move on. So sorry for the short time there, NL Gamer, but you're coming in. Go ahead.
Okay, so I can't post a link, but I've put a link to my archive. Wait.
We got infinite regression going on there.
Yeah, I see. I've put a link to my wait, I will actually post another one, a better one. I've put a link to my archive, the last one.
Dude, that's awesome.
Cool. Which has all of my this has most of my collection right now. I'm still working on some other things, but when I have more time, I will go into detail of how I acquired everything, and if I will ask questions. And I've seen a lot of questions in the chat that I missed yesterday, so I will be looking into the chat more for another time, so I can answer questions from watchers.
Excellent. Yeah, you've got some great stuff there. People who are looking at chat, I just pasted it into the other chat.
Thank you.
Check out his collection of kind of archive NASA film data tapes, and he's doing some scanning processing of them all right now, getting nice high-res scans of these things. It's just beautiful work. It's a piece of history that if you're interested in that kind of thing, take a look at, and follow him if he's got a channel. Check his stuff out. Sorry he didn't get in here earlier. Go check out the 4-hour broadcast from last night. We gave him an extensive piece of time on there. Check out his work. I will put in a timestamp at some point so you can go right to it. So thank you very much for sharing that, NL Gamer. Really appreciate it.
Sapien.
Go ahead.
It's a 3-edged sword. I just got to say, I got to get going.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we all got to get moving. Thank you very much for your contribution today.
I left the link for that document and my email in the Hangouts chat. If you want to go check that out or email me about it.
Yeah, I see it there. Your email. Yep, I see it.
So if you want to email me back, I'd be happy to pick through all that stuff because I got plenty of stuff to share with you.
Yeah, we have a link to your Google Drive in here and an email. Okay, cool, folks. It's right there.
Cool. All right, I'll see you guys later.
Thank you. Take care. Who else we got? Alexander. Parting words.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah. I have to run too. As you can see, I had people coming over. So just thanks for the chat, guys, and I'll check out the one from last night, and hopefully I'll be on the next one. I think I'm gonna. What I want to do, I'm trying to get a couple people together to do a like a double your donation drive for your trip.
All right.
If we can do it with the flat earthers to get them involved too.
Yeah, if we can, that'd be great.
Yeah. So we'll look forward to the next chat, and we'll do it during the next chat.
All right, cool.
Okay.
All right, man.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Azarak.
Yeah, sure. I just thank you for having me on. I just like to say that there is currently a SpaceX launch going on, T-10. So.
Oh crap!
Okay. So yeah, if you want to head over to the SpaceX official live stream, they're launching it right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. I'll have it in my other window as I work here. Excellent. Thanks for the heads up.
All right.
Keep that science enthusiasm going. All right.
All right. Goodbye.
All right, take care. Hey, Chu. So we're taking off. Did you have any? Are you still there? You seem like the screen might be frozen. Yeah, I think Chu's gone. All right, I'm going to bump Chu. All right. I'm going to bump Chu out of there. And so we're going to sign off here.
Goodbye.
Take care. NL. All right, Christian. Pleasure as always.
And thank you. You as well.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. That's the end of my my chat, my hangout. It's been almost an hour and a half, a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but I think we had a good conversation. I don't know when the next one's going to be. I will put an advertisement up at least 24 hours before my next one. Once again, take a look at the links in the description for the Kickstarter if you're interested in supporting my effort to go on the Polar Explorer. It's a trip around the world, circumnavigating poles. Please contribute whatever you can, but do not contribute more than you can afford. That's the last thing we want. I'm not asking people to put themselves out for this. Do what you can, support in whatever way you can, even if it just means relinking. That would be awesome. Thank you very much, folks. You have a good weekend. Take care.